The idea of ghosts has captivated human imagination for centuries. Tales of spectral figures, eerie whispers, and haunted places populate folklore worldwide. From the misty graveyards of Western ghost stories to the ancient ancestral spirits of Eastern traditions, nearly every culture has some form of belief in supernatural entities. Fear of the unknown, the dread of what lurks beyond death, and the curiosity about the unseen world have driven humans to explore the concept of ghosts for millennia. Ghost stories have been passed down through oral traditions, literature, and modern media, shaping societal views on the supernatural. Some cultures revere spirits as protectors, while others see them as tormented souls needing assistance. The fear of ghosts often stems from deep-seated psychological anxieties, fear of the dark, fear of punishment, and fear of unresolved guilt. However, such stories also serve a moral function, reinforcing ethical values by warning against greed, dishonesty, and betrayal, which are often linked to the fates of wandering spirits. But what does Buddhism say about these supernatural entities? Unlike popular culture, which often portrays ghosts as vengeful spirits seeking retribution, Buddhism provides a nuanced understanding of spirits and the afterlife, one rooted in karma, rebirth, and the nature of human perception. Rather than focusing on whether ghosts exist in a traditional sense, Buddhist teachings encourage us to explore why certain beings experience suffering and how our actions influence the conditions of existence. Buddhism does not outright dismiss the existence of spirits. Instead, it contextualizes them within the broader framework of samsara, the cycle of birth and rebirth. Ghosts, as understood in Buddhist cosmology, are not simply lost souls, but beings experiencing the karmic consequences of their past actions. In this perspective, the real question is not do ghosts exist, but rather why do some beings exist in such suffering? This perspective shifts the focus from fear to understanding, from superstition to wisdom. Understanding ghosts through the lens of Buddhism leads to a transformation in perception. Instead of dreading the unknown, one can develop compassion for suffering beings. The Buddhist approach to spirits is not about avoidance but about addressing the underlying causes of their distress. By doing so, practitioners cultivate wisdom, kindness, and a deeper awareness of the interconnected nature of existence. Buddhism categorizes spirits as Petas or hungry ghosts. These beings exist in a state of immense suffering due to their past negative karma. Unlike spirits in Western folklore, which are often perceived as malevolent entities haunting specific locations, Petas in Buddhist cosmology are beings whose existence is marked by insatiable cravings and endless torment caused by their past misdeeds. The Petavathu, a section of the Khataka Nikaya, recounts various tales of such beings, people who, due to greed, attachment, or unwholesome actions in their previous lives, are reborn into a realm of deprivation. The suffering of a Peta is not inflicted by an external force, but rather a direct consequence of their own past actions. Their hunger and thirst represent their overwhelming desires and unfulfilled cravings from their previous existence. A famous Buddhist story describes a once powerful king who, during his lifetime, hoarded wealth and refused to share even a grain of rice with the hungry. Upon his death, he was reborn as a Peta with a gigantic, bloated stomach and an impossibly tiny mouth, symbolizing an overwhelming craving that could never be satisfied. Such tales serve as moral lessons about the consequences of greed and the importance of generosity. The Tirokutta Sutta illustrates that these spirits often linger, unable to find peace, yearning for what they once had. However, unlike horror stories that depict ghosts as dangerous entities seeking revenge, Buddhist teachings emphasize that these spirits are suffering rather than causing suffering. The solution, then, is not fear but compassion. The text describes how the living can generate merit, panna, through acts of charity, ethical conduct, and mindfulness, which can be dedicated to these suffering beings. By performing good deeds and dedicating the merit to Petas, it is believed that they can receive relief and even be reborn into better realms. The suffering of a Peta is temporary, as all karmic conditions are impermanent. While some may remain in this unfortunate state for an extended period due to strong attachments, others may transcend their suffering through the intervention of living relatives and their own eventual exhaustion of negative karma. This perspective offers an alternative to eternal damnation found in some religious traditions, providing hope that even in the spirit world, transformation and liberation are possible. It is also worth noting that Petas are not limited to haunting graveyards or abandoned homes, as often depicted in ghost stories. Instead, they exist in a separate realm, though their presence may sometimes be perceived by those with heightened spiritual awareness. Advanced meditation practitioners and monks have reported experiencing encounters with such beings, but rather than fearing them, they see these interactions as reminders of the law of karma and the importance of living a virtuous life. This Buddhist perspective on spirits encourages individuals to shift from fear to understanding. Instead of dreading ghostly apparitions, one should reflect on the deeper karmic implications of their existence. This understanding fosters a sense of responsibility for one's actions, knowing that greed, hatred, and ignorance may lead to unfortunate rebirths, while compassion, wisdom, and generosity pave the way for liberation. A central teaching of Buddhism is that our actions, karma, shape our future experiences. Every thought, word, and action generates a cause that produces a corresponding effect, either in this life or in future rebirths. Those reborn as Petas often lived lives dominated by greed, dishonesty, or selfishness. Their suffering is not a punishment, but a natural result of their past choices. For instance, the story of King Bimbisara's servant highlights this concept. The servant, despite being given wealth and opportunity, hoarded food selfishly, refusing to share even scraps with beggars. Upon his death, he was reborn as a Peta, cursed to roam endlessly in hunger. This illustrates how attachment to material possessions and a lack of generosity lead to suffering beyond this life. However, Buddhist texts also show that such spirits can find relief through the transfer of merit, patadana. When the living perform good deeds and dedicate the merit to these spirits, they may alleviate their suffering and, in some cases, transition to a more favorable rebirth. This reinforces the Buddhist teaching that compassionate actions not only benefit the living but can also provide relief to suffering beings in other realms. The mechanics of karma are subtle and intricate. Some beings may carry the weight of their actions for multiple lifetimes, while others may find liberation through transformative experiences. The doctrine of karma teaches personal responsibility, urging individuals to cultivate virtuous actions, mindful awareness, and selfless generosity to shape their future states of existence positively. Thus, the spirit world in Buddhism is not a place of eternal torment but a temporary realm influenced by past actions. Understanding this allows practitioners to cultivate compassion rather than fear and to make conscious choices that lead to spiritual progress and liberation. Modern neuroscience provides intriguing insights into why people claim to experience ghosts. Many supposed ghost encounters can be explained through psychological and physiological factors rather than supernatural occurrences. Sleep paralysis, a phenomenon where individuals wake up but find themselves temporarily unable to move, is often accompanied by vivid hallucinations of shadowy figures or eerie presences. This state occurs due to a temporary malfunction in the transition between sleep and wakefulness, making people believe they are seeing spirits. Similarly, high levels of stress and grief can lead individuals to believe they have encountered deceased loved ones. The brain, in its attempt to cope with loss, may generate sensory experiences that feel real but are, in fact, manifestations of the subconscious mind. Cultural conditioning also plays a crucial role. Those who grow up in societies with strong ghost traditions are more likely to interpret ambiguous experiences as paranormal. Another factor is electromagnetic fields, EMFs. Studies have shown that exposure to high-frequency EMFs can induce feelings of paranoia, anxiety, and even hallucinations. This explains why some people report ghostly sensations in specific locations, as certain buildings or environments may have elevated electromagnetic activity. Additionally, advances in neuroplasticity research suggest that meditation can alter perception, sometimes leading experienced practitioners to report encounters with non-physical entities. These experiences, however, are interpreted in Buddhism not as ghostly hauntings but as manifestations of karma, mental formations, or heightened states of awareness. Thus, while science does not disprove the existence of spirits, it offers plausible explanations for many ghostly encounters. The Buddhist perspective aligns with this view by emphasizing that the mind plays a central role in shaping our experiences. By understanding the psychological and neurological aspects of ghostly phenomena, one can move away from fear and toward insight, cultivating a deeper awareness of the mind's power in shaping reality. Throughout Buddhist history, many monks have described encounters with spirits. These accounts, however, are not framed as hauntings but as karmic remnants seeking resolution. Once in a prosperous town, a wealthy merchant amassed great fortune but was infamous for his miserliness. He refused to donate to the poor, turned beggars away from his door, and would not even allow his servants to eat proper meals. Though he lived in luxury, his greed bound him to a deep, spiritual poverty. Upon his death, the merchant found himself transformed into a Peta, a hungry ghost, unable to enjoy the riches he once possessed. His spirit roamed restlessly, lurking around his former home, clinging to the wealth he had left behind. He could see the feasts his family enjoyed, but he himself could not taste or touch any of it, tormented by an insatiable hunger and thirst. One day, a wandering monk, attuned to the unseen realms through deep meditation, sensed the presence of the suffering spirit. Through his wisdom, he recognized the merchant's plight. The monk approached the merchant's surviving family and explained how their deceased relative remained in a tormented state due to his greed and attachment. Following the monk's guidance, the family performed acts of charity, offering food and essentials to the poor while dedicating the merit to their ancestor. Over time, as good deeds accumulated, the spirit of the miserly merchant found relief. His suffering diminished, and he was eventually reborn into a more fortunate existence, illustrating the Buddhist principle that compassion and generosity can transcend even the barriers of death. In a small village, a kind-hearted traveler once shared his last meal with a starving beggar. Unbeknownst to him, the beggar passed away that very night. However, in gratitude for the traveler's selfless act, the beggar's spirit remained near him, offering subtle guidance and protection throughout his life. When the traveler finally passed away, he was reborn in a prosperous realm, reaping the karmic fruits of his generosity. This tale highlights the transformative power of merit, emphasizing that even the smallest act of kindness can echo beyond death, shaping both the giver's and receiver's destinies. In Buddhism, death is not the end but a transition into another state of existence. The doctrine of dependent origination, Paticcasamuppada, explains that life is a continuous cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, influenced by karma. The moment of death is significant because the mental and emotional state at that instant can shape the nature of one's next rebirth. Buddhism does not teach the existence of an eternal, unchanging soul. Instead, it describes the mind as a stream of consciousness that carries forward karmic imprints from one life to the next. According to the Abhidhamma, if a person dies with unresolved attachments, hatred, or intense craving, they may be reborn in a lower realm, such as that of a Peta, hungry ghost. Conversely, those who cultivate wisdom, compassion, and generosity are more likely to attain a higher rebirth in the human or celestial realms. The Marana Sati Sutta teaches the practice of mindfulness of death, encouraging practitioners to remain aware of life's impermanence. By contemplating death, one develops a sense of urgency to cultivate virtue and wisdom rather than becoming attached to transient material possessions. One well-known Buddhist teaching is that at the moment of death, one's final thoughts can have a significant impact on the next rebirth. This is why Buddhist monks often chant and recite scriptures near the dying, helping them transition peacefully. The practice of transferring merit, patadana, is also believed to assist the deceased in obtaining a better rebirth. Ultimately, the Buddhist view of rebirth emphasizes responsibility for one's actions. Life is not predetermined by fate but shaped by our thoughts, words, and deeds. Understanding this allows individuals to cultivate mindfulness, ethical conduct, and compassion, ensuring a better future both in this life and beyond. A common fear surrounding ghosts is the belief that they can harm the living. Many cultures have legends of spirits haunting homes, causing misfortune, or even possessing individuals. However, the Buddhist perspective on this matter is quite different. Buddhism teaches that ghosts, particularly Petas, are suffering beings trapped by their cravings and attachments. Their existence is characterized by longing and deprivation rather than malice or vengeance. They may try to interact with the living, often in desperate attempts to seek merit or relief, but they do not possess supernatural powers to inflict harm. The primary way a ghost may negatively impact a person is through psychological fear and attachment. If a person strongly believes in ghosts and harbors fear, their own mind amplifies the experience, making them more susceptible to paranoia and distress. This aligns with the Buddhist teaching that mind precedes all phenomena. What we perceive is shaped by our mental states. Fear, like all negative emotions, creates suffering and may invite unnecessary distress. However, there are rare instances in Buddhist texts where spirits have been described as causing disturbances. This usually occurs when a ghost is deeply attached to a particular place or person due to unresolved karmic ties. In such cases, Buddhist monks often perform merit transfer ceremonies, offering alms and chanting sacred verses to help the spirit find peace and transition to a better state of existence. The Buddhist approach to ghostly disturbances is not exorcism but compassion and wisdom. Rather than trying to expel or fight spirits, Buddhist teachings suggest cultivating loving kindness, generating thoughts of goodwill towards all beings, including spirits, helps create positive energy that dissolves fear and negativity. Performing acts of merit, offering food to monks, donating to charity, or reciting sutras can generate merit that may be dedicated to spirits, helping them move beyond suffering. Letting go of fear, understanding that ghosts are simply suffering beings allows one to overcome fear and approach their presence with compassion rather than dread. Practicing mindfulness, observing thoughts and emotions without attachment reduces unnecessary fear and prevents the mind from fabricating supernatural anxieties. Ultimately, Buddhism teaches that the greatest danger is not from ghosts but from one's own negative emotions and ignorance. By cultivating mindfulness, wisdom, and compassion, one can transcend fear and live with a sense of peace, regardless of any supernatural occurrences. A central teaching of Buddhism is that our actions, karma, shape our future experiences. Every thought, word, and action generates a cause that produces a corresponding effect, either in this life or in future rebirths. Those reborn as Petas often lived lives dominated by greed, dishonesty, or selfishness. Their suffering is not a punishment, but a natural result of their past choices. For instance, The story of King Bimbisara's servant highlights this concept. The servant, despite being given wealth and opportunity, hoarded food selfishly, refusing to share even scraps with beggars. Upon his death, he was reborn as a Peta, cursed to roam endlessly in hunger. This illustrates how attachment to material possessions and a lack of generosity lead to suffering beyond this life. Buddhism encourages a perspective of wisdom and compassion when approaching the topic of spirits and the unknown. The teachings suggest that rather than fearing ghosts, individuals should focus on their own spiritual development, ethical conduct, and inner peace. Ghosts, if they exist, are not external threats but reminders of karma, impermanence, and the consequences of our actions. A life free from fear is cultivated through mindfulness, merit-making, and detachment from unwholesome mental states. Fear of ghosts often arises from attachment to the material world, unresolved guilt, or superstition. By practicing loving-kindness, metta, and dedicating merit to all beings, one can transform fear into compassion and anxiety into understanding. Buddhist practice emphasizes self-responsibility. Instead of seeking protection from supernatural forces, practitioners are encouraged to purify their minds, cultivate virtue, and develop wisdom. In doing so, they create an inner sanctuary that external entities, including spirits, cannot disturb. Ultimately, ghosts serve as symbolic representations of suffering and longing rather than real threats to human existence. Through the practice of right mindfulness, ethical living, and generosity, one can transcend fear and build a life rooted in wisdom and peace. By focusing on the present moment and acting with integrity, individuals can navigate the mysteries of life and death with a calm and compassionate heart.